All right. Welcome to the Cornhusker Corner, where there's no place like
This
this
podcast,
podcast. As always, we're your host, Blake, and my brother,
Brooks.
Brooks. Fair warning, if anybody is listening on our podcast version, I just got a new puppy. So if you hear squeaking, it is not Scott Frost in the bat cage. It is my puppy. So, anyways, just wanted to give
It's not
forewarning
me
there.
making weird noises.
No, it's not me. It's not all the coaching candidates I'm holding hostage. So
Oh, no, man. It's been a interesting bye week. It's been nice because I think I said this about the spring game week like a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, but it was nice because we got football and there was no possibility of Nebraska losing.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
kind of how I felt about this bye week. We got some football and got some really good games actually. I was from 11 a.m. all the way until I watched the end of the USC game, and that had to be 12:30. Um, so quite a long time. Took a little break. Took a little break in the middle of the day to work out, but I watched the Florida and Tennessee game while I did. So it's like I was still watching football.
yeah. There you go.
But it was kind of nice, man. It was actually really nice not having to worry about what coach is going to get fired after this week, or oh no, is Nebraska going to win or are they going to lose? Are they going to win by two to an FCS team, or are they going to get smacked by their age-old rival? I mean, there's just none of that this
Yeah,
week, so it was nice to see. Um,
and
and
but
yeah, and
yeah,
all the coaching candidates. Why we had, it's you also have some interest in the game too because you want to see their style. Like as a Nebraska fan, you're just watching all of these games, going, okay, what is their identity? Okay, what is their identity? Okay, what is their
yeah,
identity? Do I want that identity here? It was just
yeah,
like we're at a store or something. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you kind of mentioned one thing that I think we have to touch on before we move on to anything else, because last time we recorded was the day of the Oklahoma game.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but Chin got fired. Chin got fired.
Yep.
Bill
The
Bill
chinny
Bush
chin chin.
Bill Bush is now the interim defensive coordinator. Um, and it was one of those things that, like, we were talking on the last podcast, I think, and I said something along the lines of, it's the same coaches, different players. Like, that's why we didn't have any really issues or concerns about the defense, even though if you look on it without the rose-colored glasses that Nebraska fans tend to do, even if you say, "Oh, we suck," you still have that little bit of what if. Um,
Right.
if you
Well,
look at if you look at the defenses, really, he only had one good defense,
pretty much. I
and it
mean,
was
yeah, like
last
that could
year.
be considered good. They improved incrementally every year, and every year they had flashes. That was the other part. Every year they had flashes of
Hmm.
that aggressive play style that Chin sort of preached to the media and to the fans.
Yeah.
Um, like here's my thing about Chins. I like Chins. I think he's a good guy. I think that
Hmm.
he might even be a good coach. The jury is still out on that one. As of right now, his resume as a defensive coordinator is good and bad, largely mixed. It's mixed.
Hmm.
That's all you can really say. So he's got stuff to prove on that end. But I mean, the thing you mentioned about coaches being here that long, it's like, look, it's been obvious. Like what we'll talk about Adrian later, but what did he say after the game? He goes, we have a rock solid culture here. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And he, as much as you can say that stuff and try not to have it mean I'm talking about Nebraska, like it's
Yeah.
hard to not watch that and like be like, yeah, and we really didn't. I mean, he never got it done with. So it's like
Hmm.
Chins has been here for a long time. When you've been here for that long, you've been doing things the same way for a long time too. You probably miss stuff. You know what I mean? It's like the saying, "I need a second pair of eyes," right?
Hmm.
When you've had the same staff for a long time, you end up missing stuff, and I think that's kind of what Mickey served as. Mickey came in and really right off the bat started overhauling the entire recruiting operation of pretty much the entire football team. He came in and was
Hmm.
like, "Y'all are doing this. No, no, no. We need to be doing this, 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 and this." And to Scott's credit, it seems like largely he listened to him,
Hmm.
whether he was putting in the effort or not. Well, I mean, to be honest, it feels like beating a dead horse right now. And we don't like as far as the Scott Frost stuff. I remember you hinted at we might talk about it. I haven't wanted to talk about it yet, and I still kind of don't because everyone's heard about all this stuff, and there's specifics and details we could get into when it comes to Frost. But I really think that the time for that is going to be the off season. I really want to focus on this team right now and the coaches right now, the coaching search, which is something we gotta have to focus on as fans. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. But as far as Scott goes, we just don't know what's true, what's not. I feel like towards the off season, we'll probably have a clearer and less emotional picture anyway.
Yeah.
So I kind of do want to hold off on that stuff, but it does seem like Mickey came in and overhauled the whole recruiting operation. Now, if you remember, 2 months ago they had that dispute with the edge recruit. You remember that, where Mickey went out and got Ashley Williams, who was a 4-star edge recruit from Louisiana, and he kind of just did it because he liked Ashley Williams and thought he could bring a lot to the team. The defensive staff didn't like that he did that because they had another target on board and they only had a certain amount of spots they could fill. The other target on board being Cam Linhart. Cam Linhart was Chen's guy. So I'm not trying to read too much into that, but I mean, there's been disagreements and sort of we'll just call it disagreements between the staff on specific recruits and maybe even recruiting philosophies. So when Mickey gets in charge, to be honest with you, I don't think that I don't think he would have done I don't think he would have fired him before the Oklahoma game under any circumstance, just because how little time he had. And to be honest, unless Chin's team came out and just played lights out, and just showed real improvement and was rallying around their D coordinator, I don't think he would have even considered keeping him. Because, I mean, it was obvious that the defensive staff and Mickey have not seen eye to eye for a little while now. Now, he's the head coach now. They got to get on the same page at this point. Before, he was just a wide receiver assistant and associate head coach, and there was probably some of that. Well, Frost is our guy. Well, we've been with this guy, blah, 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 blah.
But see, here's the thing. I mean, you make a bunch of good points, but I think the thing you have to also think from the Mickey point of view is this dude has been in the winning culture. Whatever you say about our culture within the past couple of years, whether they thought they were the winning culture or what they were trying to build, Mickey has been in a winning culture.
Right.
He's a couple of years out of being on a national championship team that was probably the best college football team in the past decade, at least.
Yeah, decade at least, for sure. Maybe them, or it's hard to tell because the COVID year Alabama team was so good. But they just jerky happened.
Yeah, you're right.
They've done a lot of talking about being a winning culture, and they've done a lot of talking about culture building and talking about this stuff. But talking about it isn't it. It's obvious when you're in a winning culture and when you're not. And I think Nebraska needs to go about it in the right way, because there's been plenty of college football teams that are quote unquote winning teams with quote unquote winning cultures. But I mean, look at 2006 Florida. You know what I mean? Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to sell your soul. My point is, culture building is a hard job. Urban didn't culture build at Florida. He talent built. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like they had the greatest culture in the world. They had great leaders in Tim Tebow, and they had insane talent. But
You're right.
But Nebraska, it's a ground up operation, and building culture is hard, man. It's hard. It's hard.
It is. I'm very interested to see this week because, like you said, I don't think that Chin was very long for this world. That sounds grim. Very long for this job. And I think that he probably did.
I just registered in my mind what you said. Long for this world.
He probably did. He probably was going to make that change, but not before the long rival comes in and literally give your kids zero chance in the game.
Zero chance, man.
Give him zero chance.
Now hold on. Now
it was close to zero, but not
now
zero.
Let's be honest. Now hold on. Now let's be honest. Our offense didn't do diddly squat.
Oh
our
no, I'm
offense
not
didn't
talking
do
about the
anything
offense
that
right
day.
now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's my point about Chins is like it was a poor defensive effort, but to me, a even poorer defensive effort was 640 yards to a Sun Belt home the week before, in humble opinion, and because they had offensive support that game. The
Yeah.
offense played just fine that game, but the other day, the the defense played terrible. Let's not beat around the bush, but they also had 12 straight possessions after their first two possessions that lasted a minute and a half.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's not going to help you as a defense. You're going to end up playing 100 snaps.
No,
I mean,
for sure. But I mean, going forward now, it would be it's interesting to see how the kids respond to it because they're obviously going to practice a different way. You can just tell. Like he's even come out and said that like they probably weren't practicing how they would want to, and but I think if he's coming out and saying that, how bad was it really, and how much are they really going to change mid-season? But they had a bye week, so this was the perfect time to make that switch.
let me ask you,
So
what do
now
you think
have
about that,
now you have a
man? The
week and a
Miles Farmer
half.
comments, the tackling, because I've thought about it a lot, and it's like there's no way that we play like we play on defense last year unless we were tackling in practice. There's just no way. But then when you watch Mickey's press conference and you read the political speak that he's giving you, he's telling you plainly what the situation was, which was he was asked the question. He was asked, "What do you think about Miles Farmer's comments? Were y'all tackling before you got here or when you got here?" And here's what he said. He said, "Since I took over at head coach, we're tackling at practice, and since I've been here, we're tackling in scrimmages." Those were his exact words. Exact. And I made sure to get the exact ones because read that. I mean, that tells you everything you needed to know. It tells you that when he took over as head coach, each and every day they're in pads, they're tackling. But before then, it was not every day. It was only on scrimmage times, which if you know anything, there's like one scrimmage
day.
during spring football and there's like two scrimmages during fall camp, which is BS. To be honest, like looking back at it, and I kind of had some cognitive dissonance, and I think kind of every Husker fan did going into this year. But to be honest with it, like you should have seen this coming from on April 9th during that spring game. We should have seen this coming on April 9th during that spring game. And
Tackle.
right, yes, when they didn't tackle. And, you know, for all we say about Trev, he's great and he's awesome, but he's only, what, 44 years old, 45 years old? He's not the oldest guy in the world.
Yeah.
And so now he knows. If we see a spring game that looks like that, start looking for candidates. Start looking for candidates.
No, you're right. You're right. And, you know, I think it didn't come from a place of this isn't going to prepare us the best. It came from a place of we don't want to get our guys hurt because I don't think we have as much depth as
It always
had last
does.
year.
It always
you know,
does.
and, you know, so it didn't come from a place of I want this team to fail.
Of course.
But I think it's going to be interesting now going forward, seeing how the defense looks. It's going to be a good indicator because, you know, Indiana, they got walloped this past week, but they were playing a very good Cincinnati team that is always prepared and has a very good head coach. So
Yes,
they're gonna come. It's in Lincoln, right?
it is.
Yeah. Okay.
It's in Lincoln. It's our last home game for a little bit.
Okay, so they're gonna come into Lincoln, and you know we'll see. We'll see how the defense looks, because they have an offense that you know. Okay, how our defense is playing, there's no offense outside of maybe Iowa that could move the ball with ease on us.
I mean, Iowa's offense is from the 1890s, so that's not a good representation. I mean, the here's the
You know
thing,
what I'm,
man.
you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah,
it's going to be an
but
indicator.
We have a tendency to make every single offense we play just look like the most dynamic offense in the country, man. We do. That is like a talent that Nebraska has. And I'll say this. We've had a string of bad coaches, but it seems like it's been, regardless of any coach, that's sort of been the case for a little while, that we've had a tendency to make teams look way freaking better than they are. And, you know, I really think that's a result of the way we've been practicing. Like I've said, it's not rocket science, man. I understand, like you said, that, you know, you're looking out for your players' their injuries and keeping them healthy. And looking at our D line this year, for one example, it's like you lose one or two of those guys, and it's like now we only have two bad D linemen instead of four.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so it's just ridiculous to me because at the college level, with a team like we have, with the success rate that we've had, you just can't do that. You just
Yeah.
can't do that. Like that's the type of coaching style that you can only really get away with, like if you have a veteran NFL team. You know what I mean? Like even Dan Campbell, watch Hard Knocks, man. Their practices, they were hitting in practice because they're the Detroit Lions. They're not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're not the LA Rams. They're not you know what I mean? They're the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
So they have to hit.
Yeah.
you know. And we're Nebraska. We're not Oklahoma. We're not Alabama. We're not Ohio State. So we need to hit. Like we need to be the most physical team on the field every single game. That's how we're going to win these games, especially in the Big Ten, man. I was talking to Mom about this today. It's like, man, looking at the rest of our schedule, we just don't match up well with hardly any team on our schedule. And if we were in the Big 12, if we had a couple run and gun shootout teams to play, maybe we could pull a couple of those out. Maybe we have the personnel on offense to keep up with something like that. But in the Big Ten, with these ground and pound, run it up your gut, keep the ball for 8 minutes in every possession sort of teams, like, man, we are just not built for that at all. I look at Illinois.
No.
They're going to beat us by 35. I look at Wisconsin. They just lost to Ohio State by 40. I still think they're going to beat us by 40. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like the way these teams are built doesn't match up with us at all.
Through 4 games of the season, you're right. We've seen Nebraska teams in the past, even under Scott Frost, first couple of games, same mistakes. By about mid-season, they started to fix them. By the time it was too late to make a bowl, really. But teams can progress through the season when you make changes.
100%.
And it happens a lot. And I think Mickey's on paper, stuff he's saying, looks like he's doing the right stuff to make changes.
Look, the argument we're making with Mickey now, the argument we're making with Mickey now is basically the arguments we made about the team going into the season. And while our arguments didn't hold weight, I still stand by them, which is that these are young kids, that momentum is a big deal in college football, that all you need is one swing to get you on the right track. And also, like we've talked about as of recent, if you truly haven't been hitting in practice and all of a sudden you start hitting in practice, that's going to make a big difference with your ability to play in game speed. It just is. And we'll see if that yields any dividends. Now, they had a bye week, which kind of, with all the change and everything, came at the perfect time. And Mickey said as much. And then we have perhaps our 2 easiest games remaining on the schedule, which is Illinois and then Rutgers. Rutgers is an away game. I'm a little more nervous about that one. But Indiana and then Rutgers.
Rutgers.
So we'll see, and we'll dive a little bit more into Indiana. But this weekend there were some interesting games, man.
No, there were some good games.
Which one stood out at you? Throw one out at me.
I mean, it's got to be Adrian.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Let's do it. That was a great game.
No, it's got to be Adrian because I was sitting there watching the game and he looked like I've watched the past couple games that he's been playing in, and they're not asking as much of him. He doesn't really have to carry the team on his shoulders, but also he kind of still looked timid. Kind of still looked like he didn't want to revert back to his old ways, and I think he went into this game going after their loss last week, and that was what the K-State faithful and all them, that's what they were talking about. He was timid.
He's experienced that before.
Yep.
He's lost to a team like that before at Nebraska.
Yeah. And so I think you go into this week, it just looked like, screw it, I'm going to go play. And he played so good. And he was able to overcome some of those demons of not being able to have a sustaining drive to win the game. Like for the fourth quarter, I was like, okay, you've done good. Let's see what you got.
Right.
But, they went through it and we were up by 7, but that was really critical because, Oklahoma had started to build a little bit of momentum on offense. There was a little bit of a pucker factor. You're playing in Norman, so the crowd's getting into it. That was a very important drive. And just, I think it's one of those things that I'll always remember, which is weird in college football, when he runs it in and takes a bow, and that picture's everywhere now.
It was perfect.
Planned,
Of course.
Planned.
But it was a good plan.
awesome. Yeah, no, awesome.
Yeah, it was a good plan.
It was a great visual, and he deserves it. He deserves it
He
for all the
does.
crap that he got here at Nebraska. I've said this on the podcast before multiple times. Everyone always loved to bitch at Adrian for the one thing he did, but always forgot that the only reason we were in that game is because of him.
Oh, 100%. Yep, that's
know.
the reality. That's the reality. I mean, look, the reality of Adrian is he almost always passed the eye test when it came to the box score. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
when you're looking at his numbers at the end of every game, pretty much, actually, there was only a couple of games where it was like, ooh, Adrian had a really bad day that day. But for the most part, it was like, oh, man, he's pretty balanced. He had over 100 yards rushing a lot of the time, and he most of the time had over 200 yards passing, and his ratio wasn't the best, especially his sophomore and junior year. But he was turnover prone. But the reality was, when you watch the games, he looked like a dumpster fire because the turnovers would come at the worst possible
worst
times.
time.
So you didn't have to look at the box score to get a story on Adrian Martinez. All you had to do was watch the highlights. And today, or 2 days ago, sorry, it finally lined up because he had a great game box score wise. I mean, he was like 24 for 37 passing with 242 yards, and he had like 14 or 15 attempts with 144 yards rushing. And if you watch the game, those rushing stats especially hit at the critical times. He had a 3rd and 16 that was they were up by a score, but Oklahoma had started to take over a little bit of momentum. And they had 2 negative plays, and they were backed up. And it was 3rd and 16, and they called 4 verts, empty backfield. Adrian escapes, and just like, I'm getting
pocket
chills
collapsed.
just talking about it, man.
The pocket was starting to collapse. He felt it, and he just went. He said, "Okay."
Yeah.
It was like
Yep.
the Thanos, "Fine, I'll do it myself."
Yeah. It was
know?
awesome. It was
Yeah.
really good. It was great to watch because people like to say that Adrian took a lot of crap here at Nebraska. Adrian took a lot of crap here at Nebraska. Okay, guys, let's put this in a little perspective, okay? Now, I've heard some stories here and there. I'm not going to speak on some of those. But as far as like the fan interactions that I've had and what I've said and what I've seen, in my opinion, as long as it's not personal, a fan of an organization or a football team, whatever, has every right to criticize an athlete's performance on the field. That's what we're here for. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, like, we are gonna love you if you come in clutch for us and you're making all the plays, and we're not gonna love you if it's the opposite of that. And I think that this year, in a lot of ways, especially the dichotomy of these last 2 weeks, as Nebraska fans, has sort of revealed the tricky little secret of the whole situation, which is that, especially last year, Adrian's a baller. And if we didn't have Adrian, I don't think a lot of those games are 1-score games, to be honest with you.
No, they're not.
And
They're not. They're not. And Scott got fired 2 years ago. Really. Without him.
That could be true.
Like, okay.
Damn you, Adrian!
Damn you, Adrian. Yeah,
You were
take
too
it all
good.
back.
You were too good. Now
You're
we don't
too
like you
good.
because you were too good.
No, and something I read, I think it was on Twitter or something, and it was like, there's a lot to be said about whose fault it was in Nebraska. Both have been blamed, Scott Frost and Nebraska. The only thing I'll say is, look at what just happened to Adrian and the outpouring of love and affection from all of his former teammates. When Frost got fired, where were the thanks, coach?
True. And you know what? Scott has gone radio silent on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Like like not just after the firing. I'm talking about like the last year. Like, look at the dude's Twitter. Like, he hasn't tweeted, retweeted, or like been active at all, and like since April or March even.
There's no reception in the golf simulator.
Yeah. There's no reception in the golf simulator building.
We're not going to talk about it, though.
No.
I had to.
No. No. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. But anyway, yeah, that was a great game, man. And like I said, the dichotomy of watching Oklahoma, Nebraska's oldest rival, who we almost beat last year on the road with Adrian, coming, excuse me, sorry, coming to our house last week and put a total steaming beatdown, we'll call it, on us. And then the very next week, K-State with their new fifth year starting quarterback, but for a new team, comes in to Norman and beats them. It was the irony of the situation was not lost on me at all. I will say I am very happy for Adrian, but the irony of it as a Nebraska fan is, for in certain aspects, a hard pill to swallow.
Did you see that? I think you sent me that thing on Twitter. Like, Nebraska now is the VHS tape from The Ring.
Oh no, I don't know if I said, but I saw that. I totally saw that.
So like after you play us, it's the kiss of death, and if you look at it, it's come to pass.
Oh yeah,
every team.
Yeah, I mean there was some other good
South
games
Dakota,
tomorrow.
did they lose too?
South
we
Dakota.
beat
No, yeah, we're like one. Oh yeah, teams are 1-5 since playing Nebraska. That's the stat. That teams are teams are 1-5 since playing Nebraska. That's so bad, man.
Watch out. We're
Yeah.
coming for you.
Because Georgia Southern lost, South Dakota, or what is it, North Dakota? They're the only team that's won.
North Dakota, yeah.
They're the only team that has won a game since playing Nebraska, and they're an FCS team. Anyway, yeah. So there was a lot. The other games that were interesting yesterday were interesting because of the coaching search, really. I mean,
The Husker Coach Bowl.
right? Yeah, there was the Husker Coach Bowl, and then there was the Leipold Bowl, which was everyone seeing if Leipold can get KU to 4-0. Because let's be honest, if Leipold can get them to 6 wins this year, he's a candidate. If he can get them to 8 wins this year, he's the top candidate. To be honest, like pulling that steaming dump of a dumpster fire of a program out of a heap, like that, and bringing them to 8 wins in your second year. I mean, that's going to put you on the top 3 regardless.
Do you want to hire? Here's the thing. I know he's a good coach, and I know for the most part, anywhere he goes, he's going to have success because it looks like he has the right fundamentals down and he has the right head on his shoulders. He's a little bit older too, so it's not like another Scott Frost situation. But do you really want to hire another coach coming off another second-year miraculous turnaround?
Well, that argument's mute, in my opinion. It's just not the same thing at all. He's just got a different resume than Scott Frost. He was at Wisconsin Whitewater, like we talked about, won 6 national titles. Before that, he was he was a defensive staffer and head of the recruiting department for Frank Solich from 2000 to 2003. So he has Power 5 recruiting experience. The other thing is, watch KU's team. 2 years ago, you watched KU's team, and it was like, oh, they're not even going to be competitive at all. They don't have a chance. And you watch them yesterday, it was like, oh, they could probably compete with Texas or Oklahoma. Maybe not in the trenches, but they got dudes at their skill positions. They legitimately do. And it's like, how do you do in 2 years?
Yeah, that quarterback is good.
To me, Leipold, I call him Mr. Keep the Boys in Town. Is basically who I call him. Mr. Keep the Boys in Town, because he's going to come to Nebraska with connections to Nebraska. And by the way, it's confirmed Mickey can't get fired. If he wants to be here, he's here. That's in his contract. So he'd probably keep Mickey, and he might even keep 1 or 2 of the other guys, just for recruiting purposes. And I just think he knows what he's doing when it comes to program building. Now, is he my top candidate right now? Maybe, maybe not. But I do think that there are 3 or 4 guys that Nebraska is taking a serious look at right now that would have easily been top candidates in the last 2 or 3 searches. Does that make sense? It's like you look at some of these dudes' resumes and it's like, man, kind of on all 3 of these guys, you can't really go wrong.
What are you talking about? You're talking about
okay.
Leipold?
I'm talking about
Aranda?
Leipold. I'm talking about Aranda. and I'm talking about Urban. I mean, Urban's still that third guy. But especially Leipold and Aranda, both of those two dudes, you look at their resume and the connections to the school, the fit that they could potentially have here, and it's like, oh man, those each would be top choices in the last cycle. Even no matter what the names were being thrown around. You know what I mean?
So here's a stat I'm going to throw out to you, okay? And I think it's our problem, and it's something that nobody is talking about. And I thought about it the other day. I looked all over the online, and I could not find it. Do you know the last time an NCAA football game was released?
Oh, there's a
July 9th.
correlation.
July 9th, 2013. Bo's second to last year when that team was still good. We were still ranked. The year after that, it was an up and down year, but there was no NCAA video game. We have not been good since that game went unreleased. You know what's coming out next year? NCAA football. Next year is the first time since.
We'll see. We'll see.
That's our troubles. I'm telling you right now, that's the trouble.
We'll see. There's probably not a scientific correlation you could draw, but I do like again on the Kansas game. I do like how Leipold's team plays. He's got a hell of a quarterback. Duke is not a bad team. That's the other thing I was noticing while watching. They got a good quarterback too. He was throwing dimes here and there. And that Kansas environment was kind of fun to watch. It was. So that was a good game.
About something without an orange ball. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So that was one. That was one that you were paying close attention to if you're a Husker fan. The other one was the Nebraska Coaching Bowl. Which Baylor versus Iowa State.
You know what's funny is I watched a lot of the Kansas game. I didn't watch a lot of the in between games between the early and the late. I didn't really watch that game all that much. I was keeping up with the score. I kind of knew that Baylor was going to win that game because I saw Iowa State play a couple times, and I don't think he's a bad coach, but I think he's in the right place, and I don't want him to leave. It's just day and Ames. I don't think he's a bad coach. I just don't think he would work here.
Yeah, he's too lax for this place, in my opinion. I've watched his coaching style. I watched some mic'd up sessions with him. I don't think he would be the worst hire in the world. I will say that. It would be a big wait and see thing for me. Let's see how his teams play if he does end up getting hired, talking about Campbell. But I'll tell you, I know why that game was boring. You know why? Because Dave Aranda has a Big Ten team down there in Waco. That's why.
True.
And he has exquisite line play. Exquisite. And his defense, has an aggressive defense. I really liked what I saw out of Dave Aranda, his sideline demeanor. And just the more I look into him, the higher up my list he goes. I think I've maybe have said this before, but I think that we'll call it, this is what it's going to become. So you get used to this verbiage. We are in the Power 2. We are in the Big Ten or the SEC. The reason it's Power 2 is because TV contracts. We could get into that, but I feel like we already have. So we're in the Power 2. And the rest, what are they? Group of 8 at this point, right? So if you're a Group of 8 team, you got to start getting worried about your head coach. I'm just going to be honest. Because some of these Power 2 jobs are going to be open here and there, and you're just going to have a better shot to have the resources to be able to get it done at these schools because you're just making triple the amount in certain cases as these other schools. And for instance, if you're Baylor and you're paying Dave Aranda $4.5 million, he's got a $6 million buyout, then I'm not saying that we could do it, but I'm pretty much saying we could do it. I think so. I don't know how likely it is, but Dave Aranda is, in my opinion, the perfect fit. I also want to note that Mickey mentioned him by name in his press conference the other day. Did you notice that?
No.
Not a lot of freaking people did, okay? Mickey mentioned him by name in his press conference the other day when he was talking about Bill Busch. He was like, well, he played under Dave Aranda, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of like the Bill Belichick thing with Lamar recently where he mentioned his contract. It's, you know what I mean? It was like, I don't want to read too much into that, but Bill Belichick doesn't talk a whole lot about players' contracts in press conferences. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And if you're Mickey Joseph as an interim head coach, I'd say the same thing about potential head coaches that they would hire because you're trying to get the job. I'd keep those dudes' names out your mouth, to be honest. Like if I were him, like that's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. And he mentioned him by name. And I read a post today that sort of summarized sort of what I was feeling about Dave Aranda. Speaking as a philosophy professor, Aranda sounds like a legitimate lover of learning. I'm obviously biased, but I had no clue he was like this in an interview. So many coaches have been compared to Tom Osborne, but if you look at Aranda's actual liberal arts educational background and listen to him speak, the resemblance to T.O. is actually warranted way more than, say, Riley's simple, gentle demeanor. People forget Tom Osborne has a doctorate in education psychology, or at least fail to understand the likely correlation between his education and his success. Aranda appears to be a great communicator, but he probably has a wealth of approaches he can take to convince players why they should work hard and be good people. Also, don't let his calm demeanor fool you. Aranda's continual learning screams alpha. It makes sense. He worked hard with Leach as well. I see why Trev Alberts might be pulling out the stops here. He's a great, great fit. Donors would love him, and so would players. He would mesmerize them. That's a great summary of pretty much exactly how I felt when I saw his interview. Like I didn't know much about the guy. I heard college football analysts talking about him and Baylor and all that stuff, but I just didn't know much about the guy. And then I saw his interviews, and I was like, oh, this dude is smart. Very smart, and you're almost hanging on every word he's saying. He's that type of coach. And I want to make a note that he was Wisconsin's D coordinator under Bielema with some of the best defenses they had, and he was LSU's D coordinator in 2019 when they won the national championship. He was their D coordinator from 2016 to 2019, some of their best years. And then after 2019, once the dumpster fire started, he got the heck out of there and went to Baylor, went 2-7.
He got hired after that year, and then they hired Pelini.
Right. Went to Baylor, went 2-7 in the COVID year, 2-7, which was a weird year for everybody. But then the very next year went 12-2 and won the Sugar Bowl and the Big 12. So there's a lot there. I just think he would be the perfect fit. I think he's another guy that likely keeps Mickey and probably Bush as well. And
the only hesitation I have, which I understand coaching, where he's coached in the SEC, he's coached in the Big Ten, but right now he's a head coach in the Big 12. It doesn't always translate, even if it looks like it will on paper.
Right.
I don't think I think he would, but I don't want another. This is going to take 3 years, and I don't think Husker Nation could handle that either. You need.
Well, it depends on what the 3 years look like, because it's not a high bar around here. You know what I mean? That's my point. It's not a high bar.
You're right. When
at
Scott
all.
got hired, it was like, okay, we're going to start winning 10 games again, and
Right.
then it was like, okay.
Well, no,
9, 8.
I remember national commentators. I remember Colin Cowherd. They hired Frost today. I've always said that Nebraska is a 5-year rebuild. It's a 5-year rebuild. So stay patient, Husker fans. It'll be 5 years. Well, here we are on year 5, Colin Cowherd. And we gave him too much time. That's what we did. We gave him too much. And I remember the sentiment in this. Look, I was there at the Colorado game, his first game. I remember the sentiment in the stadium was like, it's not going to be there immediately. Like, it'll take a couple of years. It'll give him a couple of years. Give him a little bit of a leash. And I don't think that's like, I think with a good coach result, especially on a team that's as low and as down bad as our team, I think with a good to decent coach, you'll be seeing results pretty immediately. I'm just going to be honest. Think
about this though. Since Callahan, probably, when have we had losing seasons back to back? We hadn't had that in a very long time. Even Riley didn't have losing seasons back to back. He had a bad year his first year. His second year was okay, and then he had a bad year his last year. And so Scott's first year, they were still expecting to go to a bowl. That was still and then the year after that was we were supposed to win.
We're in dire straits.
And so,
I agree.
So now it's gone for so long since we've seen that success. Yeah. The bar is lower now because we're so far removed from having that success that we would die to have Pelini success right now, which the second
Right.
curse.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
The bar is very low. So my point is, because the bar is very low, the coach is going to have a longer leash just because of that. Because success, here's the thing: if you're the real deal, okay? If we hire a guy and he's the real deal, we will see improvement in 2 years, and we will be good in 3 years. That is how it works, no matter where you are. Okay. And coaches that are the real deal have proved that wherever, whenever. Doesn't matter. If you're the real deal, you will see improvement in the first year, major improvement in the second year, and you'll be good in the third year.
But look at how much talent we actually have on our team. Like on paper, look how much talent we have on our team. We have very good athletes on our team.
I agree, but you can't judge it by that.
No, but even like you look at them, they're good athletes. Okay, they're good athletes. They're poorly coached.
Yeah.
They're poorly coached.
Yep.
So you take that roster, if we can really cut down on attrition, then any coach that's going to come is going to bring players from their teams.
Boom.
Okay, so you bring that in with our guys. It's much. That shouldn't be a 3-year rebuild. That's what I'm trying to say.
I agree with you.
It's not like coming in with Riley when we were depleted. We had Stanley Morgan and Spielman on offense, and I can't even remember somebody. Lamar Jackson, I guess, on defense. Doman was there, but he wasn't Doman yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, we
Right.
have the pieces there if we can keep them in place.
Well, what has been the key word of pretty much this podcast so far, right? Culture. No, culture. No, I mean, this podcast, this episode, culture, right? Culture. So, like, that's been the issue. What is attrition a result of? Sometimes it's the result of your success because you're Alabama and you're Georgia, and all of your third string 4 and 5 stars are leaving. But that's a good
problem
part.
to
But that's
have.
not us. That's not us. It's a result of our culture. It's a result of players not being bought in. It's a result of players. You know what I mean? They're not recruiting their roster well enough. So a good coach, like the guys we're talking about, Leipold, Aranda, even Campbell, those dudes have good cultures. Okay. And if that guy can come in and establish his culture here at Nebraska, any of those dudes, I agree with you. We do have talent on the roster. That's never really been the problem. We've always had talent on the roster. I mean, look at the same thing with Texas, right? They've always had talent on the roster, but they've had culture issues. The reason I'm thinking about Texas is because I had the thought this week that I was like, damn, man, Casey comes to Nebraska and then he gets a beat down like that. He probably hasn't experienced that. And then I remembered, I was like, wait, bro, he's been at Texas. Like, he's been at Texas, bro. Like, he lost to Arkansas by like 40 points in the second game. His first start or something like that. He lost to Arkansas by like 40 points.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of the kids on our team haven't experienced a loss like that because we haven't lost like that in a while. I think the last time we lost like that was when Ohio State came in, Scott Frost's second year.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, right. That
just
is the concerning thing. That is, like, when you look at all of it, that is the concerning thing. Because say what you will about Scott, but his players never gave up. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to put anything on Mickey. Look, this situation that Mickey has been this situation that Mickey has been put into is like he's literally trying to stop a big rig with Flintstone brakes. You know what I mean? Like he's sticking his feet through a damn big rig and trying to stop it with his damn feet. That's what it's like. And so it's a hard job. And it's definitely hard when you're talking about 6 days and Oklahoma's coming into town. So I'm not going to judge him too hard on that. But if you are going to say anything, it is concerning that the first game in a long time that we've seen players genuinely give up was the first game. Scott's gone. Now we'll see how it plays out. I'm excited to see how it plays out, to be honest. I hope that because it'll be euphoric. If Nebraska can have a semblance of a football season at all this season, it will be euphoric because we've just been whiplashed left and right these last couple weeks. And if we can finally be like, oh, we're going to go to a bowl game at least or something like that, that'd be crazy.
There's something I want to bring up. And it was a preseason thing. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it was an outside view of what Nebraska should do this year. You went on that guy that does the Big Ten talk on YouTube. What is his
Mark
name?
Rogers, yeah.
Mark Rogers. You went on him and you were talking about the state of Husker football, and you said like we could win this many games, but we could win only like 3. And he goes, "There's no way you're not
remember
winning
that. I
less
remember
than
that.
7." He said, "There's no way." And you had, I've been a Husker fan a long time. I don't underestimate our ability to lose that many games. And he goes,
Yeah.
"But it's not going to happen this year." So that's been sticking with me because
Me too.
because dude, okay, yeah, on paper, but you know, who really thought it was going to, you know, look like that?
Nobody
Another
did.
Nobody. Here's another thing that kind of was going through my head when I was watching the Maryland Michigan game.
Yeah.
We talked so much crap about DiNardo when he went on and
Oh,
said that
yeah.
Maryland had the best looking team that he'd seen so far, and he had already seen Nebraska. We trashed him. We were like, "Oh my gosh, how could you think that?" They look pretty good. They look
You know,
pretty
I've been
good.
got by this before, okay? I've been got by this before because I remember in 2012, DiNardo did his Big Ten tour, and he was talking about how undersized our D line is. He was like, "Our D line's so undersized," and blah blah blah. I was like, "No, no, no!" And fast forward, we're playing 265-pound Cameron Meredith against Wisconsin and late in the year. I mean, it's just like that. That's why we lost the Big 12 or Big Ten championship game, by the way, because we had 260 pounders in the middle. Anyway, yeah. So noted. Jerry DiNardo doesn't really have any stake or interest besides Big Ten overall. I mean, and maybe Ohio State, it could be argued. But
In our defense, the other guys were saying the team looked really good.
yeah, I mean, he didn't say we looked bad this year. I'm saying, we did make a note that he said Maryland is the most talented team I've visited so far, and he had visited 5 teams. It was like Indiana, Rutgers, Nebraska, Illinois, and then Maryland. It was like all those teams and then Maryland, and he was like, Maryland's the most talented team. And I was like, one of these things is not like the other. Come on, we're Nebraska. Like, we're supposed to be way more talented.
Yeah, no, when I was just thinking also the other day about how far as Husker fans are just how far like not just our program but our expectations have fallen. And now like I look at like Big Ten teams and I think, oh, I hope that we can beat Rutgers. When that's not even something that you would even think.
How about this one? How about this one? I hope we can make it competitive against Minnesota this year. I hope. Like,
Yeah,
they're
they
good,
look-
man.
they look
Minnesota's
good.
legit this year. They are
look
legit.
good.
Mo Ibrahim looks like he hasn't lost a step. Their O-line looks athletic as hell. Like, they got it going
rowing the
on.
boat.
Minnesota
It's
is a
all that
good
boat
team.
rowing. It's
And
all
they
the boat
don't play Michigan or Ohio State for the whole rest of the year. They don't even play them. Like their
Really?
big crossover games, Penn State.
State.
Yeah, Penn State, which is going to be a
Penn
good
State's
game.
defense-
It's going to be a good
Penn
game.
State's defense looks pretty good. Their offense
Right.
is, but that's Penn State ball.
Yeah, and I do think Purdue will keep it close with Minnesota as well. I think both Penn State and Purdue will probably keep it close with Minnesota. Maybe even Iowa, just because of how good their defense is. Maybe. But like we said, 1891 offense over there.
Every time I just turn to watch, I just see Petrus just trying to do something athletic and just looking like a stick that
Yeah.
put wheels on and said, "I'm going to be a football player."
Yeah. You know what's funny is talking about Minnesota versus Michigan State. Michigan State is like, us as Husker fans looked at them last year and was like, whoa, they were really good. They went in the transfer portal and they got this guy and that guy and they are so good. We're going to use that model and we're going to be good. And then like we both teams this year were like Nebraska, number 7 in the transfer portal. Michigan State was like number 9 or something like that. And then like, we're the worst 2 teams in the Big Ten, maybe. like Michigan State's pretty bad, bro. Their
and,
offensive
yeah.
line looks terrible.
Mel Tucker, every time they show him on TV during like the hotter months, he's just sweating like he's like a fat kid looking at a hot dog. Like he's
Yeah.
just like, and then mad. He's just so mad.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's getting.
Right
I'm
after
not
that
going to criticize their
extension, too.
contract with him yet. I'm not going to criticize their contract with him yet because he's still on that 2015 Alabama staff. Who knows what they'll look like in 2 years with Mel Tucker? Maybe he's going into assessment mode right now. He's already got a plan. But
Plus, it's 2 games. It's what?
but 10
3
years,
games in.
10 years, $95 million.
It's 10 years.
10 years,
Oh,
$95 million. Yes, sir. And they just got walloped by Minnesota at home. Again, legit Minnesota team. I mean, nobody's doubting that at this point. They have made short work of every team they've played so far. I mean, seriously. And Tanner Morgan looks great. Mo Abraham looks great. Their offensive line looks really, really good. Their defense
Tanner
looks
Morgan
formidable.
basically, like, lives in like the Minnesota practice facility. Like,
I
there
flipped over to
forever.
that game. I flipped over to that game and I saw this corner blitz. Beautiful. Or maybe it was coming from deep, like a safety blitz, something like that. It was a defensive back who blitzed for Minnesota, made a beautiful play, tackled the quarterback. I was like, man, that was an athletic play. White kid, who was that? And it's like, sack made by Ryan Stapp. And I was like, why do I remember that name? Looked up in my notes, 12/5/2021. Player I want. It said Husker Pod at the top of it. It said, player I want, Ryan Stapp. And I was like, oh, that was the one they got. He was the one from Abilene Christian that I wanted. And he looks good. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, we could use a Ryan Stapp. Anyway, yeah, so those were some good games, man, the other day. It was honestly, like I said, probably the best week so far of watching football, just because there wasn't any Husker football to stress about. But
True.
there is this
That-
week.
There is this week. There's this week, and I hope I'm not flooded. That hurricane could hit us. We're at least going to get a little bit of wind and rain down here. You're fine, but yeah. So that might. I hope that I can watch it, and it didn't, because it's supposed to hit later in the week.
Well,
so
might as well bust out the radio and get the get some tinfoil, get the antenna extender going.
there you go. Yeah.
Or you
in
can just
bed
call me and
under-
I'll do play by play.
Yeah, because I was the best at that as a kid. I do remember that. But anything else before we wrap up?
Let's do our little Indiana quick thing. You want to do that real quick and then we'll do it?
Sure. Let's just give a. We talked about Indiana a little bit
Yeah,
already.
they're the second worst team in the Big Ten, in front of us, so this is going to be our best chance for a win here. So very important game for Mickey to get his win because he, like we said, in season momentum, something Scott never was able to do, and it's something that if Mickey can do, it can really yield benefits going forward. Because if they can get a win under the belt, a week of practice after a win with a new regime. That's going to yield positive results.
Momentum.
Yeah.
Momentum, yeah.
So that being said, I think that the score is going to be Indiana 35, Nebraska 21. I don't really have any hope going into the rest of this. I'm not gonna lie. Like, go Big Red. I'm rooting for them.
28-21 Nebraska.
28-21 Nebraska. All right.
I think that our offense can figure some stuff out. There's a couple guys that are in the rotation now that haven't got a lot of playing time that I think are going to come out. Like Urban ran very well against Oklahoma. I know is
AJ Allen's hurt. I don't know if we mentioned that on the podcast.
AJ Allen's
He's hurt.
Broke
Broke his collarbone.
He's hurt. He's done. But we still have Grant. If we
Kevin
can get
Williams
that-
as well.
Man, we can get that run game going. We have different offensive linemen. Sometimes that adds a lot. We have good skill guys. They just need to show up. If they show up, we're winning.
If they show warm-ups, pregame warm-ups, and I see Thomas Fedoni in pads, my prediction would change. To be honest, I just think
True.
another player like him that's going to be on the field would really provide a spark for our offense. And if our offense can get cooking, and our defense can find some sort of a rhythm, we can wipe the floor with Indiana. But I don't know, man. I just don't know. Like, Scott Frost is gone, but like we haven't had success after bye weeks in like 5 years. We're like 0-5 or 0-6. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But that's going to be it for us today on the Cornhusker Corner. Always remember that there's no place like
This
this podcast.